Do not buy Bitcoin. As somebody that has been buying Bitcoin consistently and mining it for several years now, I have stopped buying Bitcoin. I have actually sold some of my Bitcoin and I am waiting, and let me explain why. When it comes to Bitcoin, there is something known as the 4-year cycle. Now, the reason that we have a 4-year cycle is because of an event called the halving. The halving is an event that happens roughly every 4 years, and it is where the supply of new Bitcoin being mined gets cut in half. And so with the Bitcoin network, we have miners placed around the world. Their job is to secure the network, and in return for securing the network, they get rewarded with Bitcoin. They're basically mining that Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin that they're getting rewarded with gets issued roughly every 10 minutes, and roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. On April 20th, it got cut in half most recently, and so now that award is 3.125 Bitcoin that gets issued to a miner roughly every 10 minutes. When Bitcoin was founded, it started at 50 Bitcoin that was being issued roughly every 10 minutes. And on November 28th, 2012, we went through the first halving event, which cut it to 25. On July 9th of 2016, we went through the second halving event, which cut it to 12.5 Bitcoin being issued roughly every 10 minutes. On May 11th of 2020, it got cut to 6.25 Bitcoin, and on April 20th of 2024, it got cut to 3.125 Bitcoin. And so, as you can see, it is not exactly down to the 4-year mark. It's maybe 3.8, 3.9 years, but it happens roughly every 4 years. Now, the reason this is so important is because of what happens after the halving. In this event, the pace of new Bitcoin entering the market is reduced. And because we live and operate in a market economy, our prices are dictated by supply and demand. When we have a change to one of those factors, being supply or demand, we are likely to see a change in price. And when we go through the halving, we are basically reducing the amount of new supply that is coming into the market, and that has a significant impact on the price of Bitcoin. And so what happens here is that this decrease in supply of new Bitcoin being issued causes a price cycle that lasts roughly 4 years. And so all I'm trying to say here is that Bitcoin historically has a 4-year price cycle. That price cycle is caused by the halving event, and as traders, investors, and analysts, we need to try and understand that data because it tends to repeat itself. Here are the 4 cycles that we've been through so far. Bitcoin started in basically 2010. We saw the first halving in 2012, in 2016, in 2020, and in 2024. And what I want to point out to you here is look at the last 3 cycles. We go through the halving, we see a run up in price, we see a fall down in price, and then we see a basically slow recovery going into the next halving. Run up in price, fall down in price, slow recovery, halving. Run up in price, fall down in price, slow recovery, halving. The history seems to repeat itself here, and this is super advantageous to us as traders and investors because we can start to decode it a little bit to figure out where the highs and where the lows are actually going to be. And here's what it looks like. The average time between the Bitcoin halvings works out to roughly 3.8 years. It's supposed to be 4 years, but what happens is as new miners come online, they accelerate the pace at which these blocks are being mined, and the timeline gets shrunk just a little bit from 4 years down to 3.8 years. That is the timeline and the length between the halving events. Now, the length of time between the cycle highs is 3.94 years, which is extremely close to the timeline that we are seeing with the halving. And that's why we think that there is a 4-year cycle. And so the highs of each cycle are roughly 3.94 years apart on average. The halving is roughly 3.8 or 3.9 years apart on average. And what we will also find is that the cycle lows, meaning the lows of each of those 4-year cycles, is basically 3.98 years apart. And so we have a very clear cycle that is happening. It is caused by the halving event. We see a cycle high and a cycle low, and then we see another halving event. And this is repeated 3 times already, and it is likely to continue to repeat again in the future. Maybe not identically, and maybe not to the same extent and the same numbers, but it is likely going to repeat. And so what we want to think about then is, when do we want to buy and when do we want to sell? And the question that should be coming to mind right now is, well, when was the last cycle high? And if you look at the data and you look at the math and you look at the charts, you will see that the high of the last cycle occurred on November 10th of 2021. And so if we take the data that we have, which is the timeline between the different cycle highs, which is 3.94 years, and we take November 10th, 2021, and we add 3.94 years to that date, that is going to give us the next cycle high of October 19th, 2025. Which is 2 days away from when I am filming this video. And this is the reason that I have stopped buying and accumulating Bitcoin. I've actually sold some of my position and I plan to buy back in lower. So I think we are going to see a cycle high. I actually think we have already seen it, because when you look at the Bitcoin chart, what you'll see is we set a brand new all-time high at the beginning of October here. On October 5th or 6th, we just barely touched $126,000, and since then we have fallen almost 16% down to $105,000, which is a drastic decline. And I think it's going to go lower. If history repeats itself and this cycle continues, I think we have already seen the cycle high. I don't think it's going to come back up in the next 2 to 7 days here. I think we just saw the cycle high at the beginning of October here, and I think we're entering into the cycle low now. So when is the next low going to come based off of the data that we have? Well, it's very, very clear. The last cycle low was November 21st of 2022. And when you add on to the data that we already have, it forecasts the next cycle low to be somewhere between April and October of 2026. And so for me, my plan is to not buy Bitcoin and not mine Bitcoin. I'm going to be stacking cash and stacking other assets with a plan to repurchase into Bitcoin between April and October of 2026, assuming that the pattern continues to play out. If we see Bitcoin striking all new highs in December, then this plan is probably out the door. But based on historical data, historical numbers, and historical patterns, this is what I am planning for right now. Now, if you are interested in getting into crypto and getting some free crypto so you don't even have to worry about losing money, definitely check out the link in the description to this video for Newton. That is where if you make a $100 deposit and make a $100 trade, you'll get a free $25. That's an instant and free 25% return. That is better than you are going to get almost anywhere else. And all you have to do is create an account and make an investment. The link is in the description down below. This is going to be the best way for you either to get a free $25 or to get started in crypto. So definitely check it out. And now let's just wrap up the video here. What am I doing with my own money? Well, like I said, I sold off a small portion of my Bitcoin. I still hold most of it. I'm a long-term holder, no matter the volatility, but I took a little bit of profit to make a large purchase. I just bought a property out on a lake in British Columbia. So I'm super stoked on that. But as of right now, I am planning to buy as the prices fall, and I plan to buy in the most between April and October of next year, assuming that this pattern continues. That is where I think the bottom is going to be. That is what I am doing with my money. I hope this helped. I hope this gave you a new perspective. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.